It's Thursday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Hope you guys are having a good one out there as well. Good show coming up. Going to talk a lot of Gopher volleyball here in a little bit with Jeff Day from the Star Tribune. Gophers made the NCAA tournament. It was dicey for a while this year. They were not playing all that well in their first season under new head coach Keegan Cook, but turned it around in the last, 4 or 5 weeks, really finished the season strong. Sent on the road for the first 2 rounds. It's a little unusual for them. They're kind of used to being at home, but made the tournament, heading to Omaha, and they'll be there tomorrow facing Utah State in the first round. If they get past that, they would probably face Creighton, the host of that the first 2 rounds of the tournament. That would be Saturday. So good stuff coming up there. Jeff will be there. So we'll preview that, talk a lot about this team, how they turn their season around, things of that nature. Gopher women's basketball team had a good win yesterday. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. Some transfer portal quarterback stuff I want to get to as well. First, though, what I miss. It's Wolves against Utah tonight, which means opportunity number, 1,000 to relitigate the Rudy Gobert trade of a little over a year ago. Now, we don't have to do this every single time they play Utah, right? But this seems to be a good point for another check-in, because things are a little different than they were at various points last year, even earlier this year. Rudy Gobert, the whole trade last year, the 4 firsts, the players, the Walker Kessler part of it too, so it ended up being almost like 5 picks, 5 first-round picks. Got pretty well slammed for a lot of last year, and I was part of that as well. The worst part of it was that the player the Wolves thought they were getting in Rudy Gobert just did not look like the Rudy Gobert they probably thought they were getting, and all of a sudden you were like, oh man, is this because he's hit some sort of wall, his age, over 30 now? Is this going to be the Gobert they have for the duration of his contract? And if that was the case, the trade was going to look bad, right? What they gave up was okay, you can probably live with it if you kind of squint a little bit, because the picks aren't going to be that bad. Even the one they gave up in 2023 ended up being the number 16 overall pick. Is that really going to be a player who makes an impact? It's a guy who's playing for Utah now. He's fine. It's a guy, Keontae George, who's having a okay, not great rookie season, not very efficient, still young. Guy like that wouldn't be playing for the Wolves. They can't even get their young players from last year, years before, onto the court with all the veterans. So you get it from that standpoint. But the problem with it was that Gobert wasn't playing the way a superstar would play last year. And because you had already made this trade, you were limited in what you could do with future trades. You had taken your big swing with these draft picks, because you can't trade draft picks in consecutive years, and that was limiting them, and the player they got was not performing. Now, fast forward to this year, Rudy Gobert is now playing like an all-defense NBA player again. He's playing like a candidate again for Defensive Player of the Year. That has made all the difference in how we are looking now at this trade. The Wolves are 13-4. Gobert is playing at a very high level, covering the court like crazy, kind of roaming down in the paint, swatting shots, affecting shots, everything like that. He's a big part of the reason why their defensive rating is, I think, still number 2 in the league. Opposing field goal percentage, I think, is best in the league. They are playing an elite level of defense, and you would imagine that will continue to a certain degree. I don't know if they're going to be the best defensive team at the end of the year, but they should be a top 5 defense at the end of the year with all the pieces they have right there. Rudy Gobert, a big part of that. So that piece of it is interesting to me, how our perception of that trade, how the national narrative around that trade is starting to change. You're like, okay, I kind of see what they were doing now. They'll have their first round pick in 2024. If they keep going pretty well, the pick they gave up in 2025 won't be that bad. They could still probably, be a pretty good team into 2027, even if Gobert is gone by then, because his contract will be done by then. So, what they gave up won't seem so bad at that point. And that's what Tim Connolly's job was, right? He had to have that vision. I'm hoping to talk to him more about that, by the way, or working to arrange getting Tim Connolly, Timberwolves boss, on this show sometime in the foreseeable future. So more on that hopefully soon. But what his vision was to make that happen, how he maybe endured some of that criticism last year, how I'm sure there was some internal worry there as well, like, wow, what's going on here? Who is this player we have just acquired? This does not look like the player we thought we were getting, things like that. But the Gobert narrative is changing. That is undeniable. The Timberwolves narrative is changing. They will have to do it tonight without probably Anthony Edwards, listed as doubtful. When someone's doubtful, it's probably not going to happen. At least doubtful is probably a good sign for the Wolves, because if he's just flat out, there would be, you wouldn't know exactly how serious the hip injury he suffered the other night in that win over Oklahoma City was. If he's doubtful, at least there's a chance he could play. It also means there's no break or something like that would list him as out, or like week to week, month to month, things like that. So you would imagine Ant will be back sooner rather than later, but probably not tonight. Already without Jaden McDaniels. So, playing without two of their best young players, that will be interesting. But they should have enough to beat Utah, and Utah's struggling a little bit. Utah's not been great. Walker Kessler, injured part of the year. He's back now. He's had a couple good games lately. That's the one that Wolves fans have been worried about. Kessler, played pretty well, really well for a rookie last year. There were points where you're like, man, I'd rather have Walker Kessler right now than Rudy Gobert. That is not the case in the next probably 3 or 4 years, but for stretches last year, it certainly was. Like, Walker Kessler is going to have a nice NBA career, right? I don't think he's going to be a star. He's going to be a guy, though, that in 12 years, you're going to say, wow, Walker Kessler's still in the league. Good for Walker Kessler. He's, what is this, his 5th team, his 6th team? Like, he's going to be that guy that always has a role, is always a useful player on a good team, but he is not probably going to be a star player. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, even if the cost control of him would be intriguing in this lineup, things like that. I don't know if he'd be having the same impact as a Rudy Gobert right now. So relitigating this is interesting. We don't have to do this every single time they play Utah, but it is an occasion after last year's trade. Looking a lot better than it did a year ago. There's no doubt about that. Before we get to Gopher volleyball, found this interesting. ESPN has already done a ranking of the 13 quarterbacks that have already announced that they are entering the transfer portal. Portal doesn't officially open until the 4th, so early next week. But these quarterbacks have already made their intentions known. 2 of them strongly connected to the Gophers. Found this interesting. Of the 13 quarterbacks that are in the portal right now, ESPN ranks Ethan Kaliakmanis, the quarterback for the Gophers who is leaving. They have ranked him number 10 out of those 13, saying redshirted in 2021, just give it kind of his basic numbers. So saying he's 10th out of 13th of the quarterbacks in the portal. There's some good quarterbacks in the portal, but thought that was interesting that they ranked him 10th out of 13 in the portal right now. 5th on the list, by the way, Max Brosmer, the quarterback that the Gophers have offered, transferring from New Hampshire. He's had a really good career. 2022, 3,154 yards passing, 27 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. This year, 34-64. That was the most in FCS yards passing, 29 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He's got a lot of offers, but Minnesota looks like they're the only major to offer him so far. Probably seems like they have an inside track on him right now unless someone else swoops in. And, the cost of doing business is up there. Matt Rule, the Nebraska coach, says it takes $1 million or $2 $1 million to $2 million to get a good quarterback in the transfer portal. I don't know if the Gophers are quite up to paying that sort of thing. I don't know where they are in their name, image, and likeness, but I would not be surprised if it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to lure a quarterback like that into the system, to make an upgrade at that spot, to keep some of your own players from transferring out this year. So that's something to watch this year. I think PJ Fleck understands this is the way business is done right now. Saw all these other teams having success with transfer portal quarterbacks within the Big Ten West, wants to get one of his own, and maybe it's Max Brosmer, and according to ESPN, that would be an upgrade over Ethan Kaliakmanis.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino. Let your story begin.
Let's talk Gopher volleyball today with Jeff Day, Star Tribune writer, editor. Gophers will play Friday in Omaha, opening round of the NCAA tournament. They're on the road. This is unusual. They're usually home, but by way of a struggle at the beginning of the year, but then turning it on late, they get in, but are sent to Omaha, play Utah State in the opener. And if they get through that, Jeff, they will play, I would imagine, Creighton, the host of the regional. Creighton still has to advance too, but an opportunity there. We'll get into kind of the matchups in a minute, Jeff, and you will be there covering these matches. So everybody pay attention to that. Follow that in Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. But this probably is more about how they are playing right now as opposed to what these opponents might present to them. And Jeff, this is a team that looked like it was not even going to make the tournament maybe a month ago.
Yeah. I think you're totally right. And the way that this feels is that they have, at just the right time, kind of in the nick of time, figured out who they want to be as a team, figured out some rotations. I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing in watching them, is it feels like a team that was trying to figure out how they wanted to relate to each other on the court, how they wanted to relate to each other off the court, what they wanted the season to look like. Struggled early. It wasn't just that they were losing matches. It was that there were just stretches of play that were befuddling. If you have ever followed these players before, and of course, it's a new coaching staff. They have new transfers. They've got, 2 or 3 new players playing all the time and trying to get their system figured out and all this stuff. So there's all kinds of reasons for why a team might struggle early. But there were just stretches of play early in the season where you just felt like this group of talent shouldn't be having this happen.
Right.
It's one thing to lose. It's another thing to be giving up 10-1 runs against Iowa. You're just sitting there thinking something doesn't feel quite right. That has changed. Not to say that they're some kind of perfect team or all of a sudden they're one of the best teams in the country. I'm not quite saying that, but they are playing head and shoulders above where they were playing before. And that is because they have figured out a rotation. They have worked in a defensive specialist named Zeynep Palabliak, who is from Turkey, who everybody was excited about when they signed her. And then they kind of slowly worked her in. She couldn't start. I don't think she started playing until December. And then she really got into the rotation the last 2 or 3 weeks. Her development mixed in with Julia Hansen getting in as she's kind of a serve specialist, but also has played some major roles when she's gotten a chance to, be an outside hitter this season and get some playing time. Elise McGee has come in and really helped again to stabilize that back row with some defense. The reason I'm bringing up these players who aren't Taylor Landfair, aren't Melanie Schaffmaster, aren't Kylie Murr, aren't McKenna Wooker is because this is part of the alchemy that had to be figured out for this team. Everybody had to learn to get into a role that worked. People had to drop certain elements of their game, Wookers had to leave the court now and be comfortable letting somebody else come and serve and play some back row. All of those things, I think, probably took some time for everybody to get comfortable with. But what you see now is a team that really, night after night, for the past, let's say month and a half, has been slowly building into what they are now, which I think is their most complete version of themselves. The Big Ten, it's a weird year for the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament. 5 teams. I think the Sun Belt got 4 teams into the tournament. So you're just okay, it's, the people viewed the Big Ten with a certain kind of eye this season. And I think different coaches around the league have given various reasons for that. It could be an RPI thing, could be a scheduling thing. But to me, the Big Ten was a real grind this season. And you have these top teams, Nebraska and Wisconsin obviously leading that way. But if you paid close attention to their seasons, they were pushed several times. John Cook said this last weekend when Nebraska beat Minnesota that they won the Big Ten title on 8 points, basically, was his feeling. And so anyway, my point in saying this is that late in the year, the Gophers still haven't had a marquee Big Ten win, right?
Right.
They haven't beaten Nebraska. They haven't beaten Wisconsin. They didn't beat Purdue. They didn't beat Penn State. They didn't beat those top teams above them. they pushed Nebraska on Saturday in their regular season finale in a way that I thought was really telling about their mental fortitude. And also, again, this feeling that, hey, this is starting to feel like something better than it's been before. And now they get a chance to go away from their conference. Right. And, Utah State is seated above them. I don't know if you know how this works, but we can tell the listeners how seeding works in an NCAA tournament bracket. Get these regional hosts. That'll be Creighton this weekend. So all of the matches will be there. But then within that, they seed the 4 teams. And Creighton's the 1, Utah State's the 2, the Gophers are the 3, Colgate's the 4. Utah State is out of the Mountain West, and it's like anything with the NCAA tournament. You're quickly playing catch up to learn about a team. But it'll just be interesting to see what this looks like on a competition level. The Mountain West is a good conference, and Fresno State went in and beat them in the Mountain West Conference tournament. And then they won the conference tournament. So they're in. They were sort of a middle of the pack Mountain West team. If you're looking for a marquee Utah State win, they beat UNI. UNI is a very good volleyball team that's over in Wisconsin's regional. They lost to Nebraska, got swept by Nebraska in 3. They got swept by TCU. These are non-conference matches. In their conference play, they were fantastic. How they're going to match up with the Gophers, to me, this feels like one of those things where a major program is going to face a mid-major.
Yeah.
And the mid-major is the higher seed in this instance. It will be really telling, I think, not only for what they're capable of on Friday, but what you might be able to expect on Saturday against Creighton in how they play this Utah State team. If they come out and exert their will on them and play the way they did against a team like Nebraska, or the way they did in these last couple of weeks against some really good Big Ten teams that didn't make the tournament, teams like, Indiana and Illinois, and even, some of their wins against Northwestern that were fantastic, and, a dominant win over Ohio State. If they play like that, I think you'll start feeling like there's a chance for this team to push Creighton and make a run at the Sweet 16. And again, it just goes back to this feeling of this is two different feeling teams. That is how it feels to me as the person who's followed them all season. There was a certain vibe early that felt unwieldy, completely unwieldy. And right now it feels much more settled, much more contained, confident. And every player in that room on Sunday is like, let's go. You can just feel their energy around this, that they've worked really hard to finish 10-4 in the conference and put themselves in a position to even make the tournament. And now I don't think I would highly doubt that Utah State or Creighton will be super excited to have be in their way.
That's what I would think too. And, this is the hallmark of a good team, right? This is what you want a team to do. You want them to get better as the year goes on. This kind of reminds me of how Hugh McCutcheon built teams, although McCutcheon's teams generally were like pretty good early and then got really good late. Like this in Keegan Cook's first year was, pretty mediocre or even bad for stretches, and now has gotten to the pretty good stage, I would say. And now is maybe ascending to even more. How much of the early season kind of clunkiness, whatever you want to call it, how much of that is just, hey, it's a brand new coach, it's a brand new system. They're trying to figure out who these people are, what their strengths and weaknesses are. Whereas, you had a system under McCutcheon for a decade that you kind of knew what you were getting.
Yeah. Minnesota's been lucky because McCutcheon takes over for Hebert, who had built a really great pedigree. But, I think it was McCutcheon's third year. He missed a tournament and then reached the national championship the following year. Cook this year comes in. He's got a really nice collection of talent. But at the same time, he did have some things he needed to figure out because of players who left, especially because of Laney Choboy, who we saw on Sunday with Nebraska, who was a really good young defensive specialist. They had to go fill those spots. They had to hit the transfer portal. They had to go to Turkey to find Zainab. They had to make some moves. And then you start, putting all of this together. And, players have intimated that some of this was internal as much as it was coaching. It was about this collection of girls, 16 players with, high aptitude and high expectations, maybe pride, having to figure out who do we want to be as a collective unit and what do we want this to look like as a season. and maybe figuring that out with a new coaching staff adds a layer. You know what I mean? A layer of trying to understand each other and figure out how to boost each other up and be supportive. And I don't think it can be also understated again that they had to figure out how to put a roster on the court that could give them a chance. I mean, that to me was the biggest thing. Their serve receive was so bad early that it was just, you just kind of felt like they're not able to play volleyball in the way that any of them expect, because if you can't get a good first touch, you can't get your offense into system, you can't build any momentum during the course of a set. All of those things were evading them. And they had to settle into that. Once they did, I think you started to sense some of the more positive energy start coming out of them. And also just a recognition that if you're going to win, you're going to have to be a team. You're going to have to bury some of your ego. You're going to have to bury some of your, expectations for what a season might be for you and decide what you want it to be like for everybody else. Now, Cook and his staff, I'm sure that is just as much on them trying to help these girls understand what this can look like. And to get them to believe that, hey, if you work with us or if you let us work with you, we can get to a good place. The fact that they got there, I think, is the most important thing, not just for this season. I often, when I look at this roster, they have 2 seniors. They have 2 players who are going, who knows what happens, in college athletics these days in the offseason. But theoretically, almost everybody on this team is coming back next year.
Right.
And so when I look at this, I think not just about the development of this team this season, working with this new coaching staff, creating a new identity and not a new, but you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. Building something new, extending it off of that legacy that everybody's coming from and that Cook is inheriting, and also getting ready to push it forward and to prove that, hey, we can build a program, we can put you in a position to be successful. And Taylor Landfair in the second half of the season, or really since conference play started, has played, just great volleyball and defensive volleyball, and obviously like her normal offensive output has come back, and I think Schaffmaster's finally healthy. She looks better on the court. She's just more mobile. She was wearing a knee brace that looked like a transformer type thing. I mean, this thing was so serious early in the year, and you could just tell that she seemed limited in her mobility. Wooker to me is one of the more exciting. I don't know about you, but I love athletes that look at times like they're trying to defeat the sport. Yes. Russell Westbrook comes to mind sometimes, or Rafael Nadal, or even someone like Serena, where you're just like, you look like you're trying to not just beat your opponent, but you'd like to see if you could actually conquer the game. And she is like that. She's young, she's a sophomore, but I watch her sometimes and I'm like, boy, she has so much internal fire. And I think that can hurt her at times because it's like her game's still developing. You're a number 1 recruit in the country. You have a lot of expectations of yourself. And she's gone through adjustments this year. Like I said, it's not easy. She played 6 rotation to start the year. And that's a big ask, for a sophomore in the Big Ten and especially with the non-conference schedule they were playing with a new coaching staff. Right. Every single team they played in the non-conference is in the tournament this week. Wow. It was a monster slate. And so she had to get, they took her out of 6 rotation. They benched her in the win at Indiana, which was maybe one of the biggest wins of the season, maybe one of the most important wins of the season. Your player who is leading you in points and kills per set is on the bench for that match. Again, you talk about development. She comes back from that and has a phenomenal final 2 weeks. And she, against Nebraska in the first set, she was, again, trying so hard to hit through this really good Nebraska block, couldn't figure it out in the first set, hit negative in the first set. I think she had 1 kill on 10 attempts, 3 errors, like just not figuring it out. Then she keeps working at it. She keeps, she just has a lot of fire. I think she's going to be she already is, but I just think she has the right mindset to be eventually a leader and somebody who I think Gopher fans are just going to like. I don't know. I just can't get enough of watching her because her energy is just so palpable. So anyway, I don't even know where we started. This is how it goes with me. It's like I have so many thoughts about this team because they're just really. It's been a great season. I think your core question of did this take time to develop because of a new coaching staff? I think there's no question, but I think it also was an internal thing with this team of getting comfortable with their roles and the coaches putting them in a position to be successful. And this weekend will be huge. Like I said, Utah State, most likely Creighton. What I know about this venue is that it's intimate, a great gym for volleyball, 2,500 seats, fans on top of you, really passionate. We know Nebraska in general is just a super passionate volleyball state. And so I think it's really exciting for them. And the players, I think the players feel kind of what I'm saying is reflective of what I've heard from players. That is that they are in position right now that they should be able to get in there and do something. You
said every team they've played in the non-conference made the tournament. Creighton was one of those teams. They played them, lost in 5 sets. Now let's project out. Let's say they can beat Utah State, and that's not a given. Obviously, they're lower seeded than Utah State, and for a reason. The committee looks at these things and they seed them accordingly. And Utah State made the tournament last year. I think they were 17-1 in conference play this year. So they are, that is not something you're just going to look past or automatically put that in the win column. But let's say they do. Let's say that Minnesota and Creighton advance. Obviously, if they played them to 5 sets earlier this year when they maybe weren't at their best, you have to look at it and say, hey, this is an opportunity that there's a path to the Sweet 16, even if it's on the road against higher seeded teams. Well,
Creighton is the real deal. Is the first thing you have to know.
Sure.
They can play with anybody, and when they played Minnesota wasn't at their best, but they were missing one of their key outside hitters in Norris Sis. This is a Creighton player.
Yeah.
And so Creighton wasn't at full strength either. And, Keegan Cook said this on Sunday, as we look at Minnesota from that perspective, we say, oh, look at the growth and development of that team. Well, who knows what Creighton he said that's one of the things he was most excited about was to go see, well, what's Creighton been doing since we played them? I mean, they've lost 4 matches all season. They went and won a set at Nebraska. They just, kind of chewed their way through the Big East. When I say chewed their way, I mean, we're talking about not losing sets.
Yeah.
And what does that look like when it comes to playing a team like Minnesota that maybe provides that slight higher level of competition than some of your Big East teams? Okay, we'll see. But again, this is not a cakewalk section of this tournament. Creighton, if they can get past Utah State, and again, it's like mid-majors, just like in any sport, can be super funky. They can get you. They have an identity. That Utah State team is not going to be looking to be pushed around. But if they get past that and they play a team like Creighton, you just got to get ready to go to battle. And if you're Minnesota, the thing that they're going to rely on, which is what a lot of people have said about the final, 4 or 5 weeks of this season, is they have had to play with what they have called a tournament mindset to end this year. Because like you said, there was a real possibility that they missed the NCAA tournament. So how do you not do that? You win 10 of 14, you go down, you win every crucial match you need. You win in 5 sets against Indiana. You win in 4 sets against Northwestern and Michigan State on the road. You destroy Illinois at home in a match you have to win. And you push Nebraska to 4, and you come down to 1 point to making it a 5th set. So, again, you don't want to project too far. But all that I'm saying is that the Gophers can play with these teams. I think it will make for thrilling volleyball. And I don't think anybody who's watched this team develop would say that there's it's unreasonable for them to go and win 2 matches here. And I know that is their mindset, that they can get through this and find a way to get to that Sweet 16 and advance in this region.
The only thing I wish for you, Jeff Day, this weekend is that you don't necessarily have to, at least on deadline, I would not want it this way. I think the last volleyball tournament that I covered was 2004.
Okay.
And the Gophers went to the national title game that year.
That California
national title match. Yeah, they went to California. That was at Long Beach. Going to Long Beach in December was not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But to get there, they played 2 5-setters against Georgia Tech and Ohio State. They were hosting the regional that year, so they had a home path to the championship. They set 4 against Georgia Tech. The Gophers led 28-23, ended up losing 48-46, and then had to rally and win the fifth set.
That was a different scoring era, right? I think they played sets to 30. Or were they still playing to 35 at the time? They did play to 30.
No, it was to 30, but it was still it was rally scoring, it was still
back and forth.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
48-46.
That's crazy. Yeah. On Saturday, they played Nebraska at the lovely Saturday night 8 p.m. start. So they get, there's a little inside baseball for your podcast listeners.
Inside volleyball.
Yeah, inside volleyball. Yeah. Our deadlines it was like 9:45 print deadline.
No chance.
For the state. No.
Oh,
wasn't chance.
There was?
Because Nebraska comes out, wins the first two sets.
Right. Yes.
They're up 13-7 or 12-7 in the third.
Yeah.
And I'm going, this is over. And then Minnesota just turns the match. I mean, like that. And the PAV was already amped up early. The PAV went nuts. And I'm sitting there, it's like 9:42. And I have a whole story written about kind of, a loss in the sweep, but still kind of looking forward to what Sunday brings. And then I'm like, you just got to backspace it. It's like this whole match just changed. Yeah. And the fourth set got super tense. I'm sitting there watching that, and it's like, now we've got to hit a 10:30 deadline.
Yeah.
It makes for it's not the best way to watch sports, I guess is what I would say. But the PAV on Saturday was as lively as I've heard in my career of covering the team. It was so amped. And I was talking with Keegan Cook about, they had a weird schedule this year, back-ended 4 home matches to end the season. So they didn't, and their identity kind of developed in the middle of the year. And I think their fans didn't know what to make of this team. I think there was a lot of disappointment early. And then in this final 2 weeks, the team was so scrappy. This is a scrappy team, man. They get after court coverage. They block. They play defense as well as almost anybody in the country. They went toe-to-toe defensively with Nebraska. That is not easy to do.
Yeah.
And you could sense the crowd somewhere in these last 2 weeks and their fan base kind of recognizing what they have here, which is maybe not a perfect team, but one that if you start recognizing what their strengths are and what they do best, it's like, man, it's a lot of fun to support them. Now they're going to go on the road and hopefully not play a match that goes 48,
46. Yeah, it was like it took forever.
You just jinxed me, Randball. If you just put me
I'm just saying, like, I think that that was the semifinal, so that was probably a Friday, so the deadline probably wasn't so bad. But like, they're up 2-1, 28-23, and this is like 20 years ago. I can't remember exactly what the deadlines were or what the story I had written, but like, I'm sure the story changed completely, and they still. I couldn't, when I looked it up just now, I couldn't remember if they won or lost that set. I just knew that went 48-46 was all I knew. So I'm not jinxing you. I'm just saying I don't wish that for you. Although the Friday match is 4:00, so we don't have to worry about that. So
if they want to go deep on that one,
go deep on that one. Just don't do it to you on Saturday. These are, I'm sure they'll travel pretty well. I'm sure you get some Gopher fans down there. Are these all?
Yeah, it's only 2,500 seats, so it's like even if you travel well, there's nowhere to sit. You know what I mean? There's no room in the arena. I'll be very curious. I'll make sure and get that color into the copy.
Are these all televised, streamed? How do we know that?
First round is ESPN Plus.
So that's streaming. Yeah.
So that's streaming. And then I don't know about second round. I know once we start getting deeper in, they're on regular broadcast. Okay. And the tournament, the big thing for the tournament this year is that their championship will be on ABC. There's a lot of excitement around that. And in general, I just would say that I can't wait. I'm so excited.
You're going to be there. Yeah.
I can't wait. I just think it's the team. Like I said, the team is it's a really exciting team for what they've turned into and for what they're trying to build. It's like you talk about a first year coach and being under 500 halfway through the season and your players feeling a certain kind of way and having a lost weekend at Rutgers and Maryland and historically bad losses. And that to me is why, if you care about volleyball and if you care about the program, it's like, that's why they're exciting, because in the face of that, how many teams fold, how many teams say, I'm out. And they did not do that. And they worked their way to a really nice place by the end of the season. It's like, I don't know what more you can ask for in terms of like storyline and trajectory of a team. They've delivered this year in a lot of ways.
Who among us has not had a lost week? Who among us has not had a lost weekend in New Jersey and Maryland, Jeff Day? But stories for another time. Jeff Day, appreciate it as always. Follow his coverage, and we'll check in maybe next week. Maybe we'll be previewing the Sweet 16. We'll have to see.
All right, thanks, Ramball.
Great stuff from Jeff as usual. You can tell how passionate and knowledgeable he is about this sport. If you want to read more about it, he'll cover this tournament down in Omaha starting tomorrow. I think on the website right now, starttribune.com, there's a list of all the Minnesotans playing in this tournament. I think 29 Minnesotans playing in the NCAA volleyball tournament. This is a hotbed for volleyball that shows up in the Gophers roster, but also on rosters all over the country. So a good sport to follow right now, and that should be quite a tournament down in Omaha. Let's finish with the cooler. Will we be talking about a Gophers women's basketball NCAA tournament appearance in a few months? It's a good question. We're a little far from figuring that all out, but they look awfully good right now. Another convincing non-conference win, this time by a 31 points over Norfolk State. Grace Kochalski, 26 points, made 5 of her 8 three-pointers. Freshman with a big-time three-point shot. Dawn Plitzowite, head coach, seemed like she was pretty happy with everything she saw. The quote, "I thought our effort and intensity was really good, taking care of the ball, moving the ball, attacking when it made sense, and we did a decent job defensively." Love that last part. Coaches always want something to work on. She will go defense first. She will want them to crank that up even more once Big Ten play starts in not too long. But they look good. They look like a team that could be not just competitive, but a team that could end up being in the tournament, or at least in the mix once we get to March. That'll do it for me today. Chip Scoggins expected to join me on Friday's show. Star Tribune columnist. Want to pick his brain on a whole bunch of stuff. It's been a newsy week, right? Dean Evison got fired. That was this week. John Hines hired in his place. We got a quarterback controversy with the Vikings. We got a quarterback controversy with the Gophers. All sorts of stuff going on. Chip and I will weigh in on a lot of those things on Friday. But until then, enjoy the rest of your day. Be back at it again tomorrow.